The Crimson Throne of Dracoria had claimed 17 suitors in as many cycles. Each had approached with trembling limbs and calculated flattery, seeking to bind themselves to the most powerful being in the known galaxy. Each had failed to survive the courtship trials. The Dragon Empress. Deborah hadn't meant to kill them all, at least not consciously, but her very presence seemed to unravel lesser species. Her psychic aura could shatter minds. Her casual movements generated gravitational distortions. Even her beauty was weaponized, a hypnotic assault of scales that shifted through colors no human eye should perceive, eyes that burned with the light of dying stars. The Galactic Council had grown nervous. An unmated empress was an unstable variable in their delicate political equations. They sent their finest, Centauri princes bred for diplomatic resilience, Kree warlords whose brutality might match her own, even a Luminar consciousness that existed partially outside normal spacetime. All perished or fled, minds broken, spirits crushed beneath the weight of her supremacy. Then came Ronald. He arrived on a third-rate transport vessel, wearing a patched military jacket that had seen action in the Terran border wars. No delegation accompanied him. No gifts were offered. He simply walked through the obsidian gates of the Imperial Palace, past guards whose scales rippled with confused alarm, and requested an audience with the Empress. The court erupted in laughter. A human? One of those short-lived primates from that backwater system, the species so unremarkable that most galactic databases listed them as pending evaluation for sentience classification? Deborah heard the commotion from her meditation chamber, where she floated in a sphere of suspended gravity, trying to contain the radioactive fury that constantly threatened to leak from her cells. She should have incinerated the presumptuous creature immediately. Instead, curiosity, an emotion she'd thought long dead, flickered in her ancient consciousness. "Send him in," she commanded. Ronald entered the audience chamber, and the court fell silent. Not because of any spectacle, but because of the sheer ordinariness of his approach. He didn't prostrate himself. He didn't avert his eyes. He didn't tremble. He looked at her, really looked at her, and smiled. It wasn't the predatory smile of a warrior or the calculated expression of a diplomat. It was genuine, warm, tinged with something that might have been recognition, as if he saw past the cosmic horror of her existence to something beneath. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady. "You look tired," the court gasped. Several minor nobles fainted. The captain of the guard reached for his weapon. Deborah raised one clawed hand, halting all movement. For the first time in 300 cycles, she felt something other than the endless, crushing weight of her own power. She felt seen, tired. Her voice resonated through multiple dimensions simultaneously, a sound that could liquefy organic matter. Ronald didn't even flinch. "I am eternal. I do not tire." "Respectfully, Your Majesty, that's nonsense." He took a step closer, and reality seemed to bend around him. Not from any power of his own, but from sheer audacity. "Everything gets tired. Stars get tired. Mountains get tired. Gods get tired. You're the most powerful being I've ever encountered, which means you're probably the most tired." Deborah descended from her floating platform, her massive form, easily 4 times his height, casting shadows that moved independently of light sources. She could have obliterated him with a thought. Instead, she leaned down until her eyes, each the size of his head, met his gaze directly. "You should be dead," she observed. "My presence alone has reduced stronger beings to ash." "I've been dead before," Ronald replied calmly. "Died twice in the border wars, actually. Medical technology brought me back. After that, pretty much everything else seems manageable." "You died." She tasted the concept, unfamiliar with mortality in any personal sense. "And returned. Both times hurt like hell," he admitted. "But it taught me something useful. Power isn't the same as strength. You're powerful, probably the most powerful being in existence. But strength, that's about carrying weight. And you've been carrying the weight of this entire empire alone for how long? 347 cycles, Deborah thought, but didn't say. Since her mate had fallen in the Void Wars, leaving her to rule alone, to bear the burden of keeping 12,000 systems from tearing each other apart through sheer force of will. "The previous suitors," she said slowly, "came seeking power, alliance, legitimacy. I'm not here seeking anything," Ronald said. "I'm here offering." "Offering what?" "You possess nothing I need. He smiled again, and this time she understood what she saw in that expression. Not fearlessness, but acceptance. He had looked at death and come back. He had seen the worst the universe could offer and survived. Her magnificence, her terror, her overwhelming presence, these were just more facts to acknowledge and live with. "I'm offering to help you carry it," he said simply. "Whatever it is you're carrying. I won't pretend I understand what it's like to rule galaxies or burn with the power of 1,000 suns. But I know what it's like to stand watch alone, and I know that everyone, even empresses, needs someone to stand watch with them sometimes." Deborah felt something crack inside her, a barrier she'd maintained for centuries. Not the destructive crack of breaking, but the liberating crack of a shell finally yielding to the pressure from within. "You would share my burden?" The concept was almost incomprehensible. "You would stand beside a being who could accidentally destroy you with a moment's inattention?" "People are fragile," Ronald acknowledged. "But we're also stubborn. It's kind of our species' whole thing. We go places we shouldn't survive and survive anyway. We face down things that should kill us and figure out how to keep going. Not because we're powerful, but because we're too dumb to know when to quit." For the first time in 3 centuries, the Dragon Empress Deborah laughed. It shook the palace foundations and caused 3 nearby moons to briefly wobble in their orbits. But it was genuine, unrestrained, the sound of someone remembering what joy felt like. "You are either the bravest being I have ever encountered," she said, "or the most foolish." "Probably both," Ronald admitted. "That's also kind of a human thing." She extended one massive claw, delicate despite its size, and Ronald placed his comparatively tiny hand against it. The court watched in stunned silence as their empress, who had reduced planets to slag, who had stared down cosmic entities, who had never shown vulnerability to any living thing, made her choice. "Very well, human," Deborah said, and her voice carried none of its usual reality-warping power, just warmth. "Let us see if your species' legendary stubbornness can weather a courtship with a dragon." Ronald's smile widened. "Your Majesty, I once spent 6 months in a trench on Proxima holding a position against impossible odds. I think I can handle dinner." And so began the courtship that would reshape the galaxy, not through conquest or power, but through the simple revolutionary act of one being genuinely seeing another and choosing to stay.